One choice for live, local, smart talk on the news and issues affecting you. Join the conversation at 541-770-5633, 770-KMED. Here's Bill Meyers.
Interesting political times. State Representative Peter Buckley earlier this year ended up announcing that he is not running for re-election. Okay with that. And joining me in studio is Steve Richie. Steve Richie is a Republican candidate, GOP candidate for District 5 for Oregon House of Representatives. And effectively, Steve, this is southern Jackson County, bits of western, West Medford, Jacksonville area would be part of that too, correct?
Yeah, we actually go all the way up Green Springs, halfway to Klamath Falls, and then we come across southern Jackson County from Ashland, Talon, Phoenix, West Medford, Jacksonville, all the way out to Rouge and the Josephine County line.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background? I know that you are working with architects a lot, and you do have a private business here.
I do. I design fire sprinkler systems for pretty much anything you can name, houses, commercial buildings, apartments. I've been doing that for 20 years. Mm-hmm. Most recently moved up to Oregon in 2011. My wife grew up in Ashland, and we've always had this intention to move back up here. We were up here every year for vacation. And we finally made the move in 2011 back to Ashland. I first came to Oregon in 1982. I went to Oregon State University and fell in love with Oregon first time I set foot in it.
Yeah, what's your degree in?
I have a degree in forestry.
Really?
And I have a journalism minor.
Now, kind of interesting in forestry and now fighting fire.
Yes.
Home, residential, and business, I suppose.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, it's interesting because I came up here in 1982 to go to Oregon State because I did want to be a forestry major. And, of course, that's when the spotted owl took center stage in this state, and they started shutting down the forests. And I saw the writing on the wall by about my junior year that there weren't going to be many forestry jobs. So I took a journalism minor and kind of melded the two of those and went to work up in Washington State for the Department of Natural Resources for a while. And anyway,
it's kind of the story then.
Yeah.
Married, kids, anything like that?
I've been married for 25 years, have one son who graduated from SOU in 2014. And my wife and I just watched him drive away this morning, heading back to California. He came up to surprise her for her birthday, and we had him for a week, so that was great.
All right, very good. So now we got the basics, the pleasantries, some of the background. Now, why do you want to be a state representative here? What's a little bit of your take on that?
Like I said, when I first came up here, Oregon was such a vibrant place. I just fell in love with it. Coming up from Southern California, I met all these kids in college that spent their summers logging and working in the woods and bucking hay and fishing and hunting. And, here I spent my summer jobs in high school scooping ice cream. And here are these big burly kids that were, living the dream here in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And, the logging trucks were running up and down the freeways, and then you could smell the mills in the air, and it just, it was such a fun, vibrant place to be. And
it's a very different Oregon, very different Southern Oregon now. My first exposure to Southern Oregon, not to get too personal, was 1984, driving through on my way up to a job in Seattle, and I was thinking, why would anybody want to live in Southern Oregon? I came here in the early 90s, and then fell in love and never looked back after that point.
I have a big love for the outdoors and outdoor sports. I love getting out and hiking and getting on the lakes and just enjoying the out of doors. And
what do you think you can actually bring to the table here in the state legislature, which is, and I have to say, your district has been traditionally kind of challenging for a GOP candidate. I know you got a lot of work to do.
There hasn't been a Republican in the seat I'm running for since 1992. So it's been 24 years. What I want to do is try to take a more diverse set of opinions up to Salem. I mean, we've kind of had this one-party rule up there for the last, it's been almost a decade. I think we had one year where the House was actually split 50-50, and that's the year when they actually got some good stuff done, and because Dennis Richardson, I think, was the House Republican leader at that time, and they it was probably the last year they had some real good common sense up there.
That was the last time they were sort of forced to deal with the opposition party.
Exactly.
But there's a possibility that, you turn this one from a Democratic seat into a Republican seat, and we start getting, a little bit more to some balance, where there's a little more give and take, and not just, hey, this is what we're going to do. Are you going to vote for it or not? And then as a GOP voter, you probably say no.
Right.
To a lot of what was coming down. But still, the GOP's been outvoted so badly.
They have. They've been kind of the other party's been kind of running roughshod over us. And I want to take a more of a voice for Southern Oregon up there instead of letting Portland and Eugene and Salem lead us around by the nose. And you know what? My district is, geographically is probably 95% rural. I mean, we've got farmers and grape growers and vineyards and people in the logging industry. And
does that necessarily make it friendly to the GOP, or is there a way to maybe bridge those gaps here?
Well, I hope there's a way to bridge it. I am tired of being hung up on whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, and I'm more about sending the right person for the job. I think I bring a lot of real world experience and common sense because I have been in the business world. In fact, I have to leave here and go right back to my desk, and because I've got a deadline today, I've got to meet. And I just think it's important to, when this country was set up, and obviously our society is a lot more complicated now, but the common man could go to government and do their time and then come back and go back to their job. And now we've got this professional politician class where people go and they make it a career.
Are you looking at this as a career change, or are you looking at it differently?
I'm looking at this as going up and doing my job for a couple months a year and helping the constituents and get our voice out, and then coming back and going back to work and being a productive member of society.
You say here on your website, which, by the way, is Steve Richie without a T, as I found out because I went to Steve Richie with a T at first, and it's some weird-looking guy with his family. But SteveRichie.com has it. And one of the issues here is about funding education first. What is the principle behind this?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, that year, I can't remember the year, I think it was 2010 or something, when the House was actually split. The one thing they did that was so valuable was they funded, that was the first thing they did in the budget, is they actually funded the education system first, and then they took care of all the other stuff, because I think education is one of the most important parts of state government.
That has been something which has been quite different ever since then, in which education is held out as, hey, we're going to kill this unless you vote for all this other bad stuff.
Yeah, and what often happens is the teachers and the children are used as human shields at the end of the budgeting process, and it's like, if you don't fund education to the levels we want, then, we're going to be, our teachers and children are going to suffer. And I think if that is funded first and funded correctly, then we can take care of all the other stuff. But I think education is one of the most important functions of the state government.
What is your take on Measure 97? Is that something you felt comfortable talking about?
Yeah, I feel comfortable.
It really talks about where you're coming from when it comes to fiscal responsibility.
Sure, and I'm absolutely against it. I think Oregonians are taxed enough. I looked it up the other day because I was curious, but Tax Freedom Day is April 24th of every year now, where we're starting
to inch closer to May now.
Yeah,
all right.
Where the average person now has to work 4 months of the year just to pay their burden to the government, and that's enough. And I don't think there's any question. Of course, the other side will say something different, but I think it's going to force businesses out of the state. And corporations are very smart. That's the reason they're successful, and they will pass that tax on to us, and we will be the ones that end up paying it. It's not going to be the corporations. It's not going to hurt their bottom line.
Steve Richie, once again, is a GOP candidate running for House District seat in District number 5. District number 5. You have a question for him, 770-5633. Have you given any thought, and maybe this is too big of a situation, but a lot of the reasons why they're trying to pass Measure 97 is because of the massive problem with PERS that nobody really wants to talk about. That's certainly part of it. It's about a bailout for PERS, and it's also a bailout for the Obamacare subsidies, which have gone away. Now the state government has to make up that difference, and the only way you're able to keep that going is to either trim some other services or just get a 30% pay raise for government, which is what Measure 97 supporters are all about. How do you think we should be attacking this?
Well, I have not been intimately involved with state government. It is something that I'm going to have to bone up on, but I am a good study. But the thing I think about is state government has been growing by double digits every biennium. And one thing I learned early on when I was up in Washington was, Washington State, was that you always hear about these drastic and draconian cuts to government services. And every time there's any suggestion of reducing a budget, the opposition always likes to call it a cut. But the thing to remember is it's not really a cut. It's actually a reduction in the increases. State government is accustomed to growing at 10 or 12% every biennium. And we were to suggest, well, hey, how about you just grow at 10% or 8% this biennium, and let's trim back how much you're growing. The opposition might call that a cut, but I call that an 8% raise. And I just crunched some basic numbers. And for instance, if we were to grow the current budget in the next 2 years by 10%, it would be up to $75.9 billion in the state. But if we only grew it by 8%, it would be $74.5 billion. And right there, that's a $1.4 billion difference. So we would save $1.4 billion if we only grew by 8% instead of 10%.
Just if you were to slow down the rate of growth,
yes,
if nothing else.
And it's not a cut, it's a reasonable rate of growth.
One of the biggest challenges when you're talking to someone who's running for an office is that, all right, I get it, you want to try to keep the increases to a minimum and be as prudent as possible, and it's pretty tough because you can always get people to vote for you if you say, hey, I'm going to give you stuff.
Right.
All right? So and that's tough. So in the South County, it sounds like what you want to do is hold education harmless, first off. That seems to be the thing when you say fund education first. Any thoughts on what might be some different areas of the state that perhaps it's time to, okay, let's hold you down a little bit. We need to take care of the schools and make sure they're taken care of here first, and so we're going to do less over here. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I read a real interesting article that was in the Atlantic, and it talks about how generous Oregon's welfare system is. I mean, we kind of set the standard across the country in terms of our generosity. And, you know, it's always nice, like you said, it's really tough to run for office against Santa Claus, but at some point, you know, you got to realize who's footing the bill for all that. It's the taxpayers. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but one thing I always think about is these people go to Salem and they pass these bills, and they are lauded as these very generous individuals who do great things for the people. But the people who never get thanked for that are the people that are actually footing the bill, which is the taxpayers. And so there are areas, I think, of government that could be cleaned up. I mean, we've wasted millions, almost billions of dollars on waste with the Cover Oregon website that never happened, and the bridge that never got built. The bridge project didn't get built, yeah. And there are other kinds of overruns, and you know, I've understand that there are employees on the books that aren't actually on the books that are receiving benefits and paychecks and stuff from government. And I think government is too big and too bloated.
So here is something that this has been one of my pet projects, if you've heard me and Mr. X, talk about, has been trying to get the green influence on a more even keel around here rather than completely overrunning the state legislature. What is your opinion on Green's undue influence in the legislative process? Well, we have to get back to having common sense. And you know, I love the outdoors. My wife and I are out in it every chance we get. We walk everywhere we can. We recycle everything we can. I mean, but there has to be common sense growth, and people need to have jobs. I think they do have an undue influence, and the thing I don't like about it is the fact that these are unelected officials that are making these decisions that so drastically impact us. So what would you do to try to rein that in? You know, that's... As a state rep, I know you're one state rep out of many. That's something I'm going to have to look more closely at. Okay. Just try to get back to where there's more accountability and more voter input into these decisions. More citizen input. Okay, fair enough. 828, Steve Richie's here running for House District 5. How you doing, Don? Welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, I would like to ask the gentleman if he feels comfortable with a semi-automatic rifle in his hands.
Okay. Well, I guess to answer you honestly, Don, I don't, because I personally have not fired a semi-automatic rifle. But I I feel comfortable with a semi-automatic rifle in Bill Meyers' hands or your hands if you are comfortable with it.
Well, I am. I think Bill should take you out to the range sometime.
Maybe we'll do that sometime, Don. Thanks for the call. Glenn Archambault. Glenn, you have had such problems with state land use policy for a long, long time. You're on with Steve Richie. Go ahead.
Good morning, Steve. I appreciate you running for office. That's really a stand-up American to do that.
Thank you.
In the district that you're going to represent, hopefully, most of the land is zoned exclusive farm use or forest reserve or something of that nature. Very little of it is available for housing, industry, jobs, that sort of thing. And in the past, the folks that represented us at all levels signed an agreement called regional problem solving, which sets the land in place for 50 years. And I don't expect you to know the details, but I just thought just some basic response about land use planning and what might happen in this district. Because this, to me, your election is bigger than the president. Well, go ahead.
Wow, that's really saying something, Glenn.
Well, Glenn, I do kind of agree with that last statement. Maybe not quite to that degree, but I think the local elections definitely impact a person's life more than the federal elections do. I mean, just all the way down to the city council. I know my wife and I, being business owners and property owners, we deal a lot more with city and county and state regulations than we ever do with government regulations. But to answer your question, I guess what I'd like to see is more local control, where the local governing bodies, the counties and the cities, can make those kinds of decisions. I have to look into it. I'm a little, again, I've been working my whole life and I don't know the ins and outs of all that, but I know my wife and I have been prevented from doing some things we'd like to do on properties we own just because of government regulations that don't seem to make any sense to us.
It would be interesting to see if there's a possibility if you could band up with other legislators instead of such a focus on regional problem solving. How about LPS, local problem solving? And I think, Glenn, since you are so much involved in the lawsuits against the county's other land use issues, problems that you've been dealing with on your sheep farm, is that something we could withdraw from? Do you think? Do you know?
It would be difficult, Bill. It'd be essentially, going back on a contract you signed, and the motivation and the force from other areas of government are huge. I mean, this was agreed to by the state at the state level, and I really, and the details are long and difficult.
I know.
I mean, it just puts the average guy right to sleep until they knocking on your front door and going, "Hey, you need to do this." But I think, unfortunately, a person running for this district is confronted with this and what to do. You're either going to live with it as best you can, or we are going to change it. And that will be very, very difficult to do.
Well, I'm very much interested in hearing stories such as yours and what the other residents of the district are facing. I'm kind of a sponge at this point. I'm doing a lot of listening and talking to a lot of people, and everything I learn, I can take with me to Salem.
Glenn, could you hold on just a moment? I'd like to book you on the program on Monday. Is there a chance we can make that happen?
I think so.
Okay, because I know that you've been having a problem even with your land use to the point where the sheriff is starting to hassle you. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, and I don't think the sheriff intends to, but his course is set by law. Mm-hmm. We have a good sheriff and a lot of hardworking guys in the department, but I think they're also just throwing their hands up going, God, what are we going to do?
All right. Could we just give you a call at 7:15?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you a call. Thanks again. All right, Stan's in Central Point. Stan is here. Hello, Stan. You're with Steve and Richie.
Hi, thank you. I was wanting to ask him, what does he think about these committees up in Salem making law? I own a little sport plane, experimental airplane I made in my shop. And I had to register with the FAA so that I could fly in United States airspace. So the state of Oregon, the Oregon Department of Aviation, found out that I own an airplane, and they say, okay, now you have to register it in Oregon. And I wonder why.
Is this a model plane, Stan? I'm trying to understand what kind of plane is this.
Oh, no, I ride in it.
Oh, okay. So in other words, it's an experimental aircraft. Is that what this is?
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
All right.
And I ride it single place, 65 horsepower. But my question is about the registration. I have 2 RVs. People around me have RVs, and I know they do not register them every year. And I'm questioning why now they think that I, as an individual of an airplane, I have never, ever flown it in Oregon, but yet they are demanding that I buy a registration for the state of Oregon because I might fly it instead of, when you get ready to fly it, buy a registration.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, I can't really speak to your individual issue. I mean, I guess what I would do is if I was your representative, I would try to call and look further into your issue and find out if there's a way that you can get a waiver.
It sounds like an aviation or a transportation, Department of Transportation, some sort. I imagine the reason they're probably going after him is, first off, the revenue. I'm sure there's some revenue involved with this.
I guess the best advice I learned this from my wife is you just have to be tenacious, and you just don't take no for an answer, and you just keep asking questions until you either reach the end of the line or you get the answer you want. And I would guess that maybe your particular situation hasn't been explained well enough to the right person, and perhaps you could probably get some kind of a waiver or something.
Yeah, if it's not flying, and if it's all it's doing is existing in a barn, does it really need to be registered?
I wanted to, if I have a second, wanted to get back to what Glenn's mentioned before, and the one thing that I think is so important is just for people to get involved in these land use decisions, like we did 2 weeks ago at that transportation meeting, and give some pushback, because I think one of the biggest problems that conservatives and run into is that they're busy, they have other things, they like to spend time with their kids, they have jobs, they go hunting, they do other things, and a lot of times they're complacent in that they don't get really super involved in the local meetings and such.
See, they're not a believer in the process, and so you're thinking, all I have to do is vote for Steve Richie, and I'm a Republican, I live in Ashland, all I got to do is vote for Steve, and he'll take care of everything for me, right?
But yeah,
a little bit of that going on.
You have to, and I love listening to Mr. X come in here, but you have to get out, and you have to get involved, and you have to just be a face in the crowd and make some noise and show up and provide your viewpoint and alternate viewpoints to these things. And that's why we need to end this one-party rule in Salem.
Meaningful public comment. All right, SteveRichie.com is the website to find out more. You can get involved, sign up. You going to be doing any debates with your opponent, or is it just one of these things where it's hurry up and just get to the election? I mean, this is all kind of a hurry-up deal for everyone involved.
Exactly. Most people have 2 years. They decide they're going to do this, and they have a couple years to set up their campaigns and their websites and their printed materials and all that. And I've been at this for 2 weeks now because of the situation with Senator Bates dying, and then Alan DeBoer moving up to his race. And I think Alan would be a great fit for that Senate seat. So I'm just getting out and meeting the people. That's the best I can do, is get out and face to face and talk to neighbors and talk to people. And
all right, how can people support you and get a hold of you?
Well, I'm always looking for volunteers. They can sign up to be a volunteer on my website at SteveRichie.com.
Without a T?
Without a T. Sign locations. I'd love to put some yard signs up around the county in my district. Always need that mother's milk of campaigning, which is money. So I will never turn down a legitimate donation. But I'd like most of my donations.
Don't take any from Michael Bloomberg, okay?
Right.
I mean, I know you're in the South County, but please.
Well, I would like most of my donations to come from the district. You know, if you get on Orstar, you can see where these donations are coming from for a lot of these candidates, and it's like a who's who of public employee unions and what have you. But I prefer to get the donations locally from people who are going to be actually voting for me.
All right, very good. Steve, good meeting you here, and we'll talk more.
Thank you, Bill.
838 FM 106.7 KMED.